You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
Welcome, everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is January 5th, 2023, 7:35 p.m. Pacific time. Welcome to a new year. I thought we might talk about resilience and grieving.
Grieving or breathing?
And grieving.
Grieving.
Huh. Seems to go together in my mind. If you're really good at losing things, you don't suffer that much the loss of them, and everything, of course, is lost eventually. And part of the process of resilience is the ability to begin again. And where we get hung up is when we begin to cling to things that are already lost, wishing things to be different than they are. One of the things about being in a human body, of course, is we grow these things. It's not that we make up our minds. We're not going to do that anymore. It's actually we have created this brain structure that includes this stuff. I like the Robert Firestone description of the process of grieving, and I'm going to relay it in a Buddhist frame. You know, you have the capacity to sense something, the object that can be sensed. When there's contact, the consciousness of the sensing experience arises. It's evaluated for urgency. Does it need immediate attention? Does it not matter whether you get to it? Is there time to have a pleasant experience? Then it's compared to the perceptual database. And if we find an entry in the perceptual database that matches close enough to the undifferentiated ultimate reality, it unfolds into conceptual reality. And then in the process of remembering that experience, one of the aspects that also arises beyond the intention for an action and the action that you might take is who would you share this experience with? Because we're herd animals. We're meant to live in social groups. And so what often happens in this process is that somebody comes to mind and you think that this would be something that you would tell them. And if you have them as an actual current relationship that you can contact, the process is quite pleasant usually, or whatever the experience is. Some people have an urgency to their communications. But if the person is lost, or there's a disruption in the relationship, then when the thought goes to them, there's a little pop of sadness around that. Because we're relational beings, and because we grow memory in our wetware, if we have a long and involved relationship with somebody, there's a lot of associations that can be made to that particular person. So when we lose somebody, it may not be just a small pop of sadness. It could be a huge wave of sadness. If you've had a committed relationship to a friend group or to an intimate partner, and it lasts for a length of time, more and more of these memory entries that include the sharing aspect are formed. And then when that person isn't available, that pop of sadness could be this wave. And if it overwhelms the system, then we move into these really self-generated emotional regulation patterns. Around the grieving process, it's usually if only this had happened and not that had happened. If I had said this and not that, if I had done this or not that, if that had happened and not this, then I wouldn't have lost them and I wouldn't be in this process of sadness around that. Really, what we're meant to do is to use that energy of sadness that arises when somebody is lost to us or some activity is lost to us uh, as the energy to propel us into new connections so that we recognize that there's a loss, there's a pop of sadness, which is energy that then we can use to connect or replace the lost object. Is that making sense? I know I'm using object in a kind of object relations uh, frame. Um, we understand in Buddhism, of course, that everything is impermanent. Um, the five remembrances, I am of a nature to change. Um, I'm of a nature to grow old. There's nothing I can do to prevent growing old. I'm of a nature to get sick. There's nothing I can do to prevent becoming sick. I'm of a nature to die. There's nothing I can do to prevent my own death. Uh, everyone I have, everyone I love, and everything I have is subject to change. There's nothing I can do to prevent losing them. My only true possessions are my actions. There's nothing I can do to escape the consequences of my actions. So this is the nature of the human condition. And so what we really need to do is get good at losing things, losing people. I read recently a study that said most people every 2.5 years or so have a major disruption in their social circle. And so it's that's just a natural process in it. It used to be when I was growing up on the AM radio that we all listened to, all the pop songs were about love that lasted forever. Do you remember that? I'm not sure about the radio anymore because I don't have one in my car. Um, so how do you orientate yourself toward that resilience? Really, as I like to think of it, is the ability to go all in, to really fully engage as hard as you can, knowing that it's going to be lost. There's a poem in the chat by Elizabeth Bishop, One Art, the Art of Losing. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing further, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I own, 2 rivers, a continent, I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it like disaster. Nice, thank you. So sometimes what can happen, and this is touching into the attachment experience, is that when we're not good at forming these connections and um, they're difficult, we sort of come out of most people who have difficulty with attachment have a lot of adverse childhood experiences, and they come out of those experiences, and there's a freedom that sort of opens up in youth, that you have more agency to be uh, outside of that uh, confining family system, and you charge ahead to make it different than it was. And because the conditioning carries with you, we and we go into the formation of relationships based on our conditioning and our understanding of what they might be like, and they don't go well, and that's repeated often enough, it can accumulate a disappointment. And so what you notice in the attachment, from the attachment lens, is that people who over and over again have difficulty establishing workable relationships, when they get into their mid-30s, the disappointment is so great that they become less and less willing to attempt another relationship. And so it isn't that they don't want the connection, and they don't want that intimate experience. They don't want to risk the disappointment of another failed relationship. And so they gradually begin to withdraw from engaging in those kinds of relationships, and begin to form a way of being that doesn't include those kinds of connections. So we have to find a way to be disappointed by the nature of the human condition, and do that well enough that it allows us to continue to engage. In each moment, there's a pop of sadness that arises, and then we push into re-engaging. And that process of grieving, of using the sadness in a beneficial way, as energy to propel us into the next series of connections, knowing as we go in that it's going to be lost. That's one of the things that we talk about in Buddhist circles quite a bit. How do you adjust to that? We talk about forming relationships. I sometimes talk about that using Robin Dunbar's numbers. An A relationship is somebody that you see and take care of on a daily or every other day basis, that you tell everything to. And what we mean by tell everything to is that you give a complete and authentic expression of your experience of the present moment. A B relationship is somebody you see weekly or every other week and take care of and tell everything to. And then C's and D's are people that you encounter regularly, but you may not tell everything to. When you find somebody good, you really want to take care of the relationship because they're not so easy to find. And you want to do that knowing that it's going to be lost. But sometimes they go on for quite a long time. I have a couple of friends that, well, actually more than a couple, that I met in my early 20s that I still have relationships to. So almost 50 years of relating. It's a long time. I remember my grandmother on my mother's side. I said to her in my early 20s, I want to live to be 100. And she said, well, that's all very nice, George, but you won't know anybody. And I said, what do you mean? You have lots of friends. And she said, oh, those people, I've only known them 10 years. I used to know people 70. So there is that piece. And then there is the piece of people not staying so long. If you find a good person, you definitely want to engage and go in and support the relationship because they're so valuable to have, but at the same time understand that everything is impermanent, everything changes. People come and go. Houses come and go, jobs come and go, situations come and go. So, talking about resilience as this energy that allows you to be good at losing things and at the same time fully engaging things, each thing that comes along, each moment that comes along. And this isn't really something that is at all different than the way that it is. It isn't that we're describing this wild revolutionary idea. If you notice, every moment comes and goes. Is there a moment that you've experienced that hasn't done that? Not making sense. So that beneficial relationship to sadness, that little pop of sadness, or that ocean of sadness, is converted into the energy that you need to open into the next experiences that are happening. But if it becomes afflictive, then it is the thing that prevents you from doing it. That sense of disappointment that accumulates if it's not processed in a way that is useful, it becomes the barrier to really trying, to really reaching out. One of the things that we do with meditation is to examine our conditioning, the way that we form the experience that we're having. Consciousness, or the self-experience, the conscious self-experience is really a small piece of it. When you examine it, the whole body-mind process unfolds, and you're really in the self-experience witnessing what that is, rather than that self-experience being the driver of anything. It's the audience of the play of you unfolding. And so what we're attempting to examine in this exploration is the witness watching the way that we're conditioned unfolding in our intentions and actions, so that we can consciously monitor them and redirect them toward more skillful choices. And then if we're not mindful, of course, there's nobody watching, and our conditioning just unfolds in front of us. So a question in the chat is: the resilience in grief you're describing different from equanimity? Equanimity is the allowingness of it. So if we look at equanimity on one side, and the lack of equanimity is craving, aversion, and unconsciousness on the other, we hold the sadness experience, we hold the engagement experience with equanimity. Or we could lose our equanimity and have the same experience and be aversive to it, not want it to be happening. Or craving. Craving is, I usually describe as wanting it to be different than it is. And consciousness is not being able to be present for it. And then they can stack and multiply each other. You could not want it to be the way it is and want something else at the same time. You could not want it to be different and be unconscious of that process, and it driving the reactions that you have to it. One of the qualities of secure functioning is forgiveness, easy forgiveness. It is the understanding, this deep understanding of the nature of human conditioning, and how reactive we can be based on that conditioning, and particularly in close relationships, there's a reactivity that can, when it's not moderated cause a painful experience in the way that the other person interprets it. We make our conceptual reality and we make our expression of that conceptual reality, and then somebody who's witnessing that makes their conceptual reality out of it. But because each person's conditioning is different, what it means to each person is different. So we always have to be careful about inquiring whether the intention of your expression is actually received, or a better way to put that might be, how is your expression and what you meant actually received by the other person and interpreted by the other person, without clenching around the self experience. You'll notice when big angry self arises, or big wounded self arises, or big fearful self arises, there's a almost automatic need to defend that self experience as if it were something tangible that could be hurt in that way. This is what I think is going on. What do you think is going on? Is this stance rather than this is what's happening? When we collapse out of mentalizing, one of the teleological modes is that you interpret what somebody else is doing something as a specific meaning, like, why did you do this to me? I didn't do that to you. Oh, yes, you did. That's the non-mentalizing mode. What do you mean I didn't do that? This is what happened. And this is your intention for what happened, not understanding that that's an experience that you can create based on your conditioning and could be completely different than what the other person is doing. How do you help somebody then see that, which would be something like, oh, why do you think that? Or what happened that made you think that? Rather than locking up on and defending the self experience. One of the things that Dan Brown used to stress is the nature of karma in relationship to ethical behavior. That if you make a commitment to live an ethical life, and in Buddhism for householders, it's the first 5 of the precepts. Undertake the practice to refrain from causing harm through killing. Undertake the practice of refraining from causing harm by harsh speech. Undertake the practice of refraining from causing harm through sexual conduct. Undertaking the practice to refrain from causing harm through stealing. And then undertaking the practice to refrain from causing harm through the use of intoxicants. Thich Nhat Hanh extends that to consumption, harmful consumption. That when you live an ethical life and the things that happen to you are different than actually what you had hoped would happen or what you wanted to happen, you interpret the karma as good karma, as the good outcome. Whereas we're often relating to it as, is it what I wanted? I did this and I wanted that to happen and it didn't happen, something else happened. And so the something else that wasn't what I wanted to have happen is bad. Whereas if you live an ethical life, the things that then unfold are thought to be good karma. And then there's a reorienting around if this is the good outcome. What does that mean? Some things are lost. As it said in the poem, everything is lost. Is that necessarily bad, or can we open up to this unfolding of experience? How's that sound? So here we are at a new year unfolding. And the old year has gone. From my perspective, last year was a very difficult year. It was hard to manage the degree of losses that happened. There were substantial losses throughout the year. And I noticed in this the Christmas season that the dominant feeling of around the holidays was a sense of sadness and loss. Partly because of the work that I do in supporting different people's practice and the number of people that also were having that experience of loss, this wearing, and then the actual circumstances of my own life. And the busyness of life also, I think, is hard to just withdraw. I took the week off between Christmas and New Year's and was in Los Angeles, which is the first time I think in 20 years that I've been not teaching a retreat over the holidays. And was absolutely surprised at the depth of my tiredness. So was very appreciative of resting and how the resting changed actually my whole experience of time. It took a few days of just not doing anything before my body actually began to settle and begin to re-energize. So that's the other piece of all of this. We live in this body, and it has its qualities, and it has its requirements to function well, and we need to see that. And one of the things about aging is the resilience of the body, and the energy of the body changes. And usually, the more aged you get, it's not in the uptick side of things. The normal workload that for years I've been able to do, I can't do anymore. And there's a loss to that. Then the scaling back so that I can accommodate the body and it's the way that it is now, in comparison to the way that it was. There's a joyfulness in this. Seeing the people that matter to you and being delighted in them, being able to delight in them, people seeing you and being able to delight in you. Each moment. So for Christmas, I got myself one of these bird feeders that has a camera in it, and it has an app, so you can watch birds from your computer. It came in the mail today, and I'm very excited to hook it up tomorrow and get a close look at the birds. We have mainly house finches in Southern California. House finches are a brown and tan bird the males have an orange chest and forehead. When COVID came, the goldfinches came back. I've lived in this building for 25 years at least, and there were never goldfinches before COVID. The hummingbirds come, and we used to get the migratory hummingbirds in the summer from Mexico, but they don't come anymore. So it's just the local ones. There are two main types, the Anna and the Allen. They're named after the first name of the couple that originally registered them with the Audubon Society. The Allen hummingbirds are these small, the smaller of the two, and they have a brown color to them, and they're fiercely territorial. And I have one that has control of the whole outside, and he even flies up to me and informs me that it's his space, which I find very entertaining. And those little moments animate the day, just the interaction to the world itself. And then there's this liveliness of being alive that you can touch into, this energy of being alive that's there, this current. Having had such a challenging early life and the process of trying to dig myself out of that, that took up so much of the middle part of my life, I don't have a recollection of a sense of the sacredness of this experience of being human. And it really wasn't until studying with Dan and touching into the bond practices that he was teaching that art opened for me. I recall listening to people talk about a sense of their experience of the sacredness of this human life, and I remember early on in my meditation practice, teachers talking about the preciousness of this human incarnation, but I really didn't have much of a sense of that. It's life has always been very hard in my experience. I mean, I do have fantastic privilege. I recognize that, and a lot of that is, in some sense, winning the lottery of how I was born. But at the same time, there was a lot of penalty in it. White man, affluent, but then I turned out to be gay, so a lot of the advantages that you might have in that category were denied me when I came out. It was very different coming out in the 70s than it is now. That the New York experience, where we all fled from the families that kicked us out and found an accepting community, was fantastic. But I didn't have the sense of it being sacred. But the opening of that and touching into that sense of the wonder of being alive, I remember in the description of the chances of being born in this human life are like a sea turtle sticking its head up inside of a life ring in the middle of the ocean. That was hard for me to understand early. I do have a sense of the liveliness of things now, and the sense of the sacredness of this, and the sense of the joyfulness in people who I can connect to and who I have a sense see me. And I know that this comes from practice, this being able to use the meditation to recognize the conditioning that interferes with the way that I create the experience of this moment, and being able to set that aside and coming into this lively awareness. So how's that as a pep talk for the beginning of 2023? Lively, loving, pursuing things that are meaningful, connecting. So, why don't we do a little bit of practice? Some loving kindness, maybe for self. We start with an easy person. Go ahead and take your meditation posture. So, how did that go?
I don't have any grief for sloth and torpor.
Nice. Oh, Cindy?
Oh yeah, I always have a hard time with these, but I keep at it. And yeah. So what happened is I first tried to visualize, and by the way, I still have a hard time figuring out if I'm a visualizer or an auditory person or both, or if I switch back and forth. Because I don't really know yet.
Okay.
But I tried to visualize this friend I've known a long time as the person I'm wherever we started out. I think we're giving
Easy.
but easy person giving peace to. And then of course I drifted off in between. But then when we went to some other second round, it switched when you said, may I be peaceful.
Uh-huh.
It switched, and all of a sudden I just out of the blue visualized this meditation teacher I've been working with, who's very kind and generous with his time. And I said, may I be peaceful, but I was thinking of him or yeah. And so it switched, but it was the only time I got that really kind of warm, pithy feeling, is when I was thinking of him, but I was saying, may I be peaceful.
And what about the view?
The view, meaning what?
The view of loving kindness? Do you have a sense of that yet?
Just the feeling of warmth, but not, I don't know what you mean by a view. You mean you view the feeling or view the words or what?
Well, if you open your eyes and you look at the way that you've constructed conceptual reality, when the view of loving kindness is there, it looks a particular way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that's the idea. So you hold a mind state, and then if you're using visual, but if you hear a sound, it's filtered through the mind state, and it appears differently. When you look at the body, when it's looking through that filter, the body is experienced in a different way.
It's a perceptual shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything you view is with loving kindness.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I got there. Yeah, it's hard to tell because I get a little mind wandering and then I come back and I'm like, am I doing anything here worthwhile?
The answer is emphatically yes.
And will be the fruits of my meditation.
Every time the mind asks that, which is called skeptical doubt, it's one of the hindrances. You say, yes,
Yes, it's worth every second of meditating and not knowing what I'm doing.
Right.
Okay, then I'll keep at it. Yeah,
Good.
yeah. And I want I'll let others speak, but I want to go back to what you said at the end about um, this precious human life.
Mhm.
But if other people want to share first, because I don't want to take up all the time. Yeah.
Go for it. What do you want to say? Or are you asking me?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, basically, the precious human life, I've had a little bit of the same issues, like, well, it's been a hard life, how precious is it? But then I switch and like, yeah, it's really cool being alive. You can really engage with nature and you can have these happy feelings. And my question is around the um, samsara, getting out of the wheel of samsara. So I get confused when I think, oh, I wouldn't want to get off the wheel. I've got more to experience. This precious human life could go on, and it'd be really cool to come back and have another precious human life. So I haven't reconciled, and I also wanted to ask you how you view that is um, knowing that there's dukkha and there's suffering in a lifetime, and then wanting to get off the wheel completely versus there's so much wonderful things about being alive. I want to come back.
Well, in the Hinayana tradition, getting off the wheel is the whole goal. And
Mm.
then in the Mahayana tradition, they added the bodhisattva vow, where you vow to be reincarnated until all beings are enlightened. I don't, half the time I think that it's just an excuse for bad behavior.
I don't understand it. Yeah.
um, my experience of this is the deeper your practice gets, the more open you are to helping other people see clearly what's happening, and it has a a profound impact to see people caught up in delusion and suffering in a way that's unnecessary, really. And then there's the bodhicitta is the word, your heart opens and you want to help, but at the same time understand really what that is trying to clue them into the way it is, not something else. I don't know the answer really to these questions.
I mean, I've only heard that if you want to come back for another wife, or if you want to get off the wheel and not come back, either way, you're going to come back because you have a craving for you want it. I don't want to
Right.
come back. I do want to come back. Forget it. You're going to
Well, in the Theravada map, the first is stream entry. It's a 4-stage thing. So then you're reincarnated 7 times. Then the second path is a once returner, where you're reincarnated 1 more time. The third path is a non-returner. So you're not reincarnated. The fourth is you're not reincarnated. That's why you make a vow, and then you have to do something that would cause a reincarnation to happen if you get to that level.
That's different than bodhisattva vow.
Yeah. Well, that's essentially the bodhisattva vow.
Mm.
You engage in something that would cause the reincarnation, even though you're enlightened past the place where you would naturally be reincarnated.
Mm.
Stacy?
Hi, George. Thanks. When you're setting up the loving kindness meditation, you use a phrase, may I be peaceful. And I think you're saying the name of a teacher that makes that suggestion. And I've been listening for a few months now, and I cannot for the life of me decipher who you're naming.
U Indica Sayadaw.
Yeah, can you spell that?
In the chat.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
If you Google him, he'll come up.
Yeah, I would, but I just can't figure out what you're saying.
Good.
Thank you.
Ash?
They shouldn't give me this many buttons. It's quite a responsibility. I was talking to Rose Bostick today
Uh-huh.
about the way I've experienced view in the way, like, as you've instructed in the last month or so that I've been coming in. And one thing that I've noticed that's different about it, and I've also had a similar experience with some guided IPF, was that I'm not that once this like view is being generated, it's coherent through the in spaces. There seems to be like a physical like rising energy, like, and I'm kind of turning into just focusing on like that feel out experience.
Uh-huh.
And it's like a rising in the chest, and like there's like the posture wants to even raise the chin, and just staying with that. It seems like there's much less scrutiny than all these dichotomies of inner experience that I've challenged myself with analysis over and over again.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if that's all the product that I should be looking for, or if you have any ideas on that.
It sounds like PT. Is that what you're describing?
Possibly, but it's a very it's not like the active wild PT that I'm used to.
Right.
It
or
could
it
be,
could
yeah,
be
I haven't
bliss.
thought about it as PT.
It could be bliss energy.
I was just sort of with the IPF guidance I had, there was an experience of a settling and a support on the physical, like just like on the surface of my body. And I sort of went into like just noting with that. And
Uh-huh.
I didn't note that as PT either. It feels like a pretty like a rigid, not like a flowing experience. I don't know.
I don't either,
State.
but let's talk about it more as
Cool.
you practice and see whether we get some more data points.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We have a new level 1 starting on Saturday in the new format, which is 4 half days instead of 3-day longs. And then in February, we have another level 2 starting. For the retreat in Utrecht in June. That seems to be everything that's coming up. We're going to do a Central European time level 1 in April. So take a look at that if you're interested in that stuff. I offer this teaching freely, but or on a Dana basis, and I do hope that you'll make a donation and help support me and also the work that Mettagroup is doing. Really appreciate your practice and hope to see you soon on the path. Bye now.